Welcome to Called to Build, the podcast for faith-driven entrepreneurs and kingdom leaders who are ready to build what outlasts them. Hosted by Carl Willis, entrepreneur, pastor, and marketplace missionary. Each episode delivers biblical wisdom, insight, real-world strategy, and bold encouragement to help you lead with purpose, steward with wisdom, and multiply your impact. Because faith and business weren't meant to compete, they were meant to collide. Now, let's step into today's episode. Hey, welcome to Called to Build. So glad you've joined us today, and with me is my good friend, Jonathan Mast. Jonathan, great to have you today.
So excited to be here, Carl.
So, Jonathan, you and I got to know each other in the agency world. You're with Whitebeard Strategies, and we'll cover that a little bit today. But really what we're going to talk about today is faith, family, and legacy. And most people in the agency space and in the AI space know you for your beard, your frameworks, and your AI strategies. But before all of that, you're a husband, you're a father, and you're a follower of Christ. And so that's where we're going to head today. And so my first question I want to just kind of come right out of the chute with, you've been walking in digital innovation since 1995. And I'd like to rewind a little further and just ask, what early moments in your faith journey shaped you into the man that you've become today?
For me, it was a lot of the midlife faith journey, candidly, that made a difference. I for a number of years, due to some bad decisions, I really clung to two things. One was God's promise to us in James, where consider, and I'm going to slaughter it. I'm not good at word for word. So anybody that knows the Bible better than I do, I apologize, but I'll get the concept. But consider pure joy, my brothers, when you experience these trials, because God is turning you into the man he needs you to be. Midlife, I made some bad decisions, actually spent 3 years in prison. It was not a great time of life, but as I look back on it, it was absolutely time that God used to allow me to become the person that he needed to be so that I could serve him more fully. Combine that in with a verse that my aunt shared with me, a promise that I have claimed probably almost daily for the last 20 years. And that's Philippians 4, 6, and 7, where it says, essentially, bring all your cares to me, bring everything you need, and the peace of Jesus Christ will overwhelm you. But I'd always missed two words in that verse, in those verses. And it actually, I think everybody skips over it. It's bring all your cares, bring all your supplications with thanksgiving, and the peace of Jesus Christ will overwhelm you. And my aunt, who I was not that particularly close to, had pointed that out to me actually while I was in prison and said, I'm sure that, you think life sucks right now, and it does, I get it, but look at that. And Carl, it totally changed my perspective on life, because now I went from looking at woe is me and I was treated unfairly, and whether any of that's true or not, none of that matters, because when I started to look at it with thanksgiving, what could I give thanks for in every circumstance, including when I was separated from my wife and my family and all that, I could still find things to be thankful for. And that midlife crisis, as I'll call it, happened to me when I was in my early 30s. That has allowed me to become the servant of Christ that I can be today. And without that, I don't think I ever would have got there.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so, you've taken that experience and you propelled forward with that. It took you into the marketplace. And so you've built companies.
Yep.
You've served hundreds of clients. You've trained thousands of leaders. Where have you seen God's hand most clearly guiding your entrepreneurial path? So you set out on this journey. Where have you most clearly seen him, leading you through that?
Well, it started with, I think, when I left working for others and began building my own companies. I'd done a little bit of that, obviously, kind of in the side hustle mode, where I'd built some things and that had went reasonably well. But a point came in my life back in 2010 when enough was changing and God laid out a very clear path that fortunately my wife helped me understand and point out to me because I needed her wisdom and direction in order to be able to follow that and see that he had prepared us for a spot where we could actually go out and build our own company and do things our own way. And really from that moment forward, we did so with an eye on and a prayer daily of, Lord, let us not do what we want to do, but let us do what you've given us the gifts to do, the talents to do, but in a manner that always glorifies you. And really, again, since that first day in 2010, when I began working for myself, that's been part of our daily prayer is that whatever we do today, one, thinking on the parable of the talents, let us use the talents you've given us because I don't want to be that one talent that buries it and doesn't do something with it. My ultimate goal in life, Carl, which is beyond what you've asked, is to stand in front of Christ and hear, well done, good and faithful servant. If I can achieve that, everything else in my life has worked out the way it's supposed to because Christ told me, well done, good and faithful servant. That's it. And every day, that's part of what we try to do. Yes, we're in business, and yes, we're serving others, and yes, we're making money and all that. And none of that's a problem when we're focused on making sure we're glorifying God through every step of that process. And that's really been our whole goal through that, is to daily ask him for that guidance, that wisdom. Again, and James promises us, God promises, if you ask for wisdom and you believe, he'll give you that wisdom. Now, there are times that I've missed the wisdom he's given me. There's no doubt I'm not always perfect at listening to that. But when we're there and listening, it's amazing the wisdom that he'll provide.
Absolutely. So there's always this tension between ambition and surrender. So
Hmm.
how do you discern when you need to press forward in your business strategy and when you need to yield to God's timing?
Prayer and talking to my wife because she's much more again, she is that Proverbs 31 woman. She is there she guides me and she has a different perspective on things. I have found in my life, and I'm not saying it's this way for everybody, but when my wife and I go to the Lord in prayer and say this is what we believe you're asking us to do, and our fleece, so to speak, I know we're not supposed to have one, but I do, is if we agree on that, if we pray and we give you some time and we both feel this is that direction, then we're going to move forward full force until you put a roadblock in front of us. And sometimes that happens and we have to accept that either the way we were going wasn't where God wanted us to go, or it isn't where he wants us to go anymore, because sometimes we may be on a path for a period of time, a chapter in our lives, maybe not for what it means to us, but for what it means to somebody else that we've come in contact with or somebody we've impacted. We may never learn those things until we get to heaven someday. But I have to accept that if I'm surrendering to God's guidance, that then I need to trust that intuition that I believe he's providing in that direction in faith and in prayer to do what's best and not to second guess when that message may change because he may say, all right, you're done with that chapter. That mission's complete. It's now time to go do something different.
Excellent. Can you tell us about a moment where walking by faith in business felt risky to you, but actually God used it to confirm his calling in your life?
Yeah, it's actually been happening a lot lately because, as you know, I've worked over the last couple of years to grow a decent sized audience of people that we reach out to, a little over 500,000 people a day. We talk about AI a lot, and in that process, I've really felt leanings that I needed to start sharing my faith, not preaching from the pulpit, but just demonstrating what faith in Christ as a business person means. And so I've taken that same audience and started sharing bits about my faith. Again, not in a, repent now or you're going to hell type moment, but in a, hey, here's what I believe and why I believe it and why I think it's pertinent to this entrepreneur's walk that so many of my community is on with me. And that has not always yielded positive reaction from my community. In fact, some of that reaction has been incredibly negative. But if we take a step back and instead of just looking at the handful of people that are very boisterous about how offended they've become, and I look at the community response, I can see that it's done just the opposite. In fact, just yesterday, I got an email from a person who's far more successful than I am, somebody who I would love to learn from. I've never met. I take it back. It was actually a direct message on Facebook, but they messaged me and basically said, "Hey, just want to thank you for being so willing and open to share your faith." And I still don't think I am. I still think I'm struggling with that. I mean, I need to do it more. I never feel like I'm there, but it was reassuring to go, okay, we are reaching people not only to talk about the topics that I love in entrepreneurship and AI, but by being open and sharing our faith, my wife and I, what we believe, and what that looks like in a day-to-day life, and trying to live that out. Again, it's not about us, but it's about glorifying God, and we're seeing that some of that's coming through in spite of, the occasional flack attacks that we get from people who are, "I can't believe you just mentioned that you're a man of God, and oh, I'm so offended." Well, you made that choice. Okay, you can be offended by that. I didn't tell you you were a bad person because you're not. In fact, I just wish you would, open your heart to that. But I think that to us has been one that is very hard. I grew up in a church where when we talked about evangelism, it wasn't about doing evangelism. It was about writing a check to somebody else to do evangelism.
Mm.
And I made it into my 30s before anybody had ever even challenged me to share God's message of salvation with anybody. And I'll readily admit, I was petrified the first time I did it. And it's a process. I still don't do a great job of it. I could do so much better. But I think as with most things in life, when we begin down a path, we often realize that, wow, we're not near as close to that goal as maybe we thought we were when we weren't focusing on it. Now we focus on it and realize, wow, I've got a lot more work to do here than I maybe thought I had.
That's good. Now, as a husband and a father, neither one of those roles come with a business manual.
No,
Um,
they don't.
how has your family anchored you through the ups and downs of your entrepreneur journey?
Well, my family's always been great, but they've really anchored it, not because, and I'm not taking anything away from my family, they're amazing, but because we made a decision really early on that in order to get through life's trials and tribulations, we as a family needed not to focus on each other or on ourselves, but we needed to focus on Christ. And so when we hit those rough patches, which we all hit, and they happen, more often than I'd like, we've developed the habit of, instead of focusing internal on woe is me or what's going on or why did you do that, but we've really tried to focus on looking to Christ at that point and going, okay, we know we're stronger as a three-quartered rope. We know that having you involved in that relationship, whether it's my role as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, wherever that is, when we make sure that Christ is part of those three strands in that relationship, me, someone else, and Christ, all of a sudden those issues that come up, well, not insurmountable, and they still come up. I'm not saying they don't. There's still moments my wife probably wants to gouge my eyes out. She still loves me, but she may not like me in that moment. But we get through those a whole lot faster, and we find they happen a lot less often because our focus is now taking off ourselves and focused on Christ and the other. And I think that's helped a lot. I mean, I certainly have seen differences in the last 30 years from where I used to be and where we are today. Some of it, I'm sure, is testosterone that's not there that used to be there, but I'm going to give God all the credit regardless.
That's good. So you talk about legacy, and when you think about, your children, what is the inheritance you most want to pass on, not in wealth, but in wisdom and in faith?
God is in control. He took 7 days to create everything. You're not going to get everything done in one day either. And I guess the other part of that is, for lack of a better phrase, poo is going to happen in life. And when it does, it doesn't mean that God's deserted you. It's just that you may have made bad decisions. At least in my case, that's almost always what precluded the poo in my life. And sometimes we need to learn from those experiences. And, it's interesting, Carl. I think one of the things that helped me out more than anything else, understanding God's love, was becoming a father. Because all of a sudden, that when I became a father, I understood how much I love that child and what I would do for that child, which is essentially anything. And then realizing that I'm flawed as a human. And if Christ is my father, how much more does he want good for me? But even as a human father, I will allow my children to go through difficult things so they can learn lessons. I won't place them in those situations, but I'll allow them to go through them. And I think, to me at least, it may not be for everybody, that really shed a tremendous light on God's role with us as a father in dealing with the poo that happens in life, because it does happen. And sometimes we wonder, Lord, why are you allowing this to happen? Or sometimes even worse, why are you doing this to me? And I don't believe God does that to us any more than, as a parent, I'm going to do something to my child. But I may on occasion go, you know what? I've told you 4 times not to touch that burner because it's hot. And the 5th time, I'm going to allow you to touch it so you don't do it again. That may happen. It's probably a bad example, but those types of things can happen. And I understand that, I guess, better as a father than I ever did before.
That's good. In our story, my early career, I was a police officer. So one of the things I did, my oldest son is a police officer. So I gave him some of my equipment when he graduated the academy, and that was kind of a passing of legacy in a tangible way. Uh, in your story, do you have any heirlooms or traditions or a teaching moment kind of similar that you are wanting to pass on or carry forward that are kind of symbolic that are representative in your family?
I don't know about symbolic so much, but I ended up in prison because I told a lie.
Hmm.
And I grew up in an environment, nothing against my family. I made the decisions that got me there. I'm not blaming anybody, but I grew up in a family where truth wasn't black and white. It was very gray. And when I say very gray, I mean it was only at the farthest reaches of truth and lies that there were actually truth and lie. Everything else in between was gray. And I've really tried hard with my sons to teach them that that's not how it is, and that there is right and wrong. There is truth and lies. And especially when it's hard to tell the truth, is likely the most important time in your life to make sure that you do so. I can literally look back, Carl, to one phone call in my career that, had I not told a lie on that call, I probably would have never gone to prison. I probably would have never done anything else. It was literally that tripwire, that straw that broke the camel's back, that one thing that I should not have done and I allowed myself to do, that caused me to get in trouble. And regardless of the whole story behind that, if I can teach my family and hopefully my grandchildren as well as my sons that integrity and honesty is important. You can have tact about it. Doesn't mean we have to be rude, but there is not the justification for lying that I grew up with, meaning, well, if I'm going to hurt somebody's feeling, it's okay to lie. Or if I'm, going to get ahead and I'm not going to hurt anybody. I mean, if we're lying to the government or the insurance companies, for goodness sake, that can't be wrong. But, that's the type of environment I grew up in. I want to make sure my children see that and my grandchildren see that as differently, and that no, even when it would be to my benefit, I'm checking out at a store and I realize they charged me for 1 soda and not 4. It would be really nice to walk to the car and go, "Hey, I just got 2 free sodas." But that's not living with integrity. Living integrity is going, "Hey, I think you forgot to ring up 2 extra sodas here." And that's, again, it's very different than the way I was raised. And I hope that's the thing I can instill in my sons and my grandchildren.
That's good. So you're known for taking complex technology, making it accessible. How do you explain to your sons and to the generation behind them that what we build with our hands should always serve what God is building in his kingdom?
That's a really good question. To me, it's part of making sure that 2 things. One, that we're, regardless of what we're doing, whether we're, a teenager flipping burgers at McDonald's, or whether, now in my 50s, I'm trying to build another company. we need to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. And part of that to me is taking pride in our work. I believe there is great pride in, not in a bad pride, but in a good way, to take joy from the work that you do. Whether that means you're a sanitary engineer and a janitor sweeping the floors, or whether you're leading, a massive corporation. I think there's that point that we need to understand why we're doing it. And if we stay focused on that, I think that's what changes everything. So, my oldest son, he's a mechanic for an airline. And, not only is it important that he does a good job so that planes don't crash, but it's also important that he does a good job because he's serving Christ by doing that, and the example that he has and the work that he does. And I really want to just continue to instill that in my sons.
Good. Now, kind of shifting gears, this is a topic you and I have discussed privately before. AI is often painted as either savior or enemy. And,
Oh, yes.
as men of faith, how do you frame AI as a tool that must serve God's purposes? And how have you been able to use it in that way? I know that's a conversation you and I probably a year and a half ago
Oh,
we
yeah.
started talking about. So how have you worked through that yourself? If you're serious about building a business that honors God and multiplies kingdom impact, I've got something just for you. It's called Faith Driven Success, a free resource designed to help you align your faith with your business strategy so you can grow with confidence, clarity, and conviction. You'll learn how to put biblical principles into action and start leading with bold purpose in every area of your work. Download your free copy today at biblicalgrowthstrategies.com. That's biblicalgrowthstrategies.com, and start building success that actually lasts.
Well, I think it begins with how I look at the technology. Again, going back to the parable of the talents and my ultimate goal, to stand in front of Christ and hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." I would really hate to be standing in front of Christ and have him say, "Jonathan, we gave you this really cool tool. It was called AI, and you were scared and you buried it." And I go, "Well, Lord, but there were bad things that you could do with that." And he goes, "Yeah, but not for you to do with it." And I would absolutely dread to be there. And I believe for me, not for everybody, that's a question that matters. And so when I look at AI, I look at it as a tool, and no different than I might look at a Bible commentary or a different translation of the Bible, anything like that. All of those were impacted by men and women and humans. And that means because we're fallible, there can be mistakes in any of that, just as there can be when I use AI. But I also can use it to gain a deeper understanding and a deeper faith by doing things like I did this morning. I was reading my devotions, and one of the passages stood out to me, and I thought, I want to share something about this. And I used AI to take that concept, that passage, and help me write a social media post that shared my perspective. And it walked through a series of things. And then I thought, something I've never done before. I thought, I bet there may be somebody that reads this that isn't a Christ follower, that may wonder, what should I do next? What is that next step? And so I used AI to help me write a very simple prayer that related to what the topic I was talking about. Now, I could have done all that on my own. And the problem is that 2 years ago, before AI, I may have had that same thought, but I would have never written the social post because I wouldn't have had the time to do it. I was too busy to take the time to do it. Whether I was or wasn't, that's just the reality. And I certainly would have never taken the time to write the prayer because I was too busy. But I wasn't too busy to have AI help write that and then to review it and to post it, because I was able to do that much faster. And just literally before we got on the call, I was taking a look. We've got like 148 people this morning that have said this has been a blessing to them today. It's not me, but that word was a blessing. And so just on a very small basis, I've been able to hopefully demonstrate Christ's love and goodness And along with that, make sure that in the process of going through that, that we're again, we're glorifying him. It on a simple basis, and you and I have talked about this, it's me sitting in church on a Sunday morning and the pastor talking about something and me going, I don't know if I fully get that. For example, just recently, our pastor was talking about how Matthew was so detested in Jewish society as a tax collector. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm sitting in church going, I'm not saying I'm a fan of people that work at the IRS, but I don't detest them. I don't have any problem with them. I just, you kind of get the heebie-jeebies, I mean, it's like, okay. But that's not what it was like with Matthew because the tax collection system was different back then. And I was able to use AI to do a historical study and gain a perspective on why it was that the Jews hated the tax collectors, not just didn't like them, but literally hated them. And that depth that I was able to bring to that and a deeper understanding that I, Jonathan, was interested in, but maybe my wife, Beth, wasn't, allowed me to, again, leverage AI in a way to get a deeper understanding of that passage, that story, and actually draw closer in faith because of a better understanding of the scenario in which this happened, better context, so to speak, than had I just read it. A similar thing happened over Easter. Our pastor was talking about the final words of Christ on the cross, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but if it was telestai or something like that. And I've heard that, but I really didn't know what it meant. And in that moment, I'm like, I really need to understand what that meant because it's more than just it is finished. I knew it was more than that, but I'm not a theologian, so I don't know. But I was able to use AI to help me understand the depth of that word and what it meant in that circumstance. And it wasn't just AI telling me, by the way, it was literally AI sharing that, hey, Carl's wrote a paper about this and this person wrote this. And when we pull that together and we look at it and hear different perspectives, these are even some disagreements that are out there as to what that may be. That brings depth, and I'm comfortable with my own discernment at that point to go, okay, now I can make a decision based on that or have additional understanding. So to me, AI is the most incredible Bible study tool because it allows me to help bring those passages alive in my mind.
That's good. Now, when you know, look at your own prayer life, your study time, how has God been guiding you and giving you perspective on stewarding innovation without letting it become an idol itself? You and I have talked
Mm-hmm.
this year in particular about going AI first in our
Yeah, yeah,
businesses.
absolutely.
Um, you know, so how do we make sure we don't go AI first and not God first in
Yeah,
in
it's a no,
in critical decisions?
I think it's a really good question. In my mind, it's, I use AI to help me gather data, to help me sort through different things, not to tell me what to do. But it's there to give me information. And in that context, while it's not perfect, it's better than most any other resource that I have available to me. Let's face it, when I was growing up, we had the Encyclopedia Britannica, and you either had the condensed version, which was like 10 books, or if you went to the library, you had like 50 books and there was a lot more. Well, that was great. And at the time, that was really the wealth of knowledge that we could generally draw on as a student to figure things out. And now to think that AI has been trained not only on that, but on every book that was made up that encyclopedia and every reference and every other book that was in the library and every book that was in every library in our county and in our state. And when you do that and realize the depth of knowledge that's there, that's available to us so quickly now. To me, it would be improper if I then just decided to ignore that. At the same point, God's still in control. This is something God gave us. And so that doesn't mean that AI and I are going to sit down apart from God and make a decision about the next steps that I'm going to take in my business or my life. Do I use AI to brainstorm? I absolutely do. I also use it to try to help me figure out how to make sense of my 18-year-old son, who I love to death, but sometimes he and I don't see eye to eye, and I'm not quite sure why. Now I've got literally a partner in my pocket that I can pull out and go, okay, I tried this. This is the response I got. I'm kind of befuddled as to what's going on here. Can you give me any insights? And miraculously, while there may not be perfect, I'm getting far better insights that I can look at and go, oh, you know what? When I think of it in that context, I see where he's coming from, and it's giving me perspectives and relevance that I wouldn't have had before. That makes me a better father. That allows me to go, okay, he's taking what I said in this manner when I didn't mean it that way at all. But now I can understand how he got there, and therefore I can probably understand how to walk that back in a way that he'll accept as well, to get back to that original point and rebuild from there. And so to me, there's just so many things like that, that it's a great tool. It's a helper. It is not a replacement for us or for Christ, but it is absolutely an incredible tool that's available to us as a result.
Fantastic. And then let's talk about discernment. You mentioned that word earlier.
Mm.
You've been training leaders to use AI. What role does discernment play, and how are you helping them to avoid taking shortcuts that are going to compromise their integrity or their values?
I think the biggest thing there is helping leaders understand that AI is not a replacement for them. I often encourage leaders to compare it if they had an assistant they were working with, a really smart, really fast, really efficient assistant. But if they asked that assistant to write a memo about the next thing that was happening in their business or in church or whatever the case may be, in all likelihood, they should be taking that memo and proofreading it before they sign it and send it out to everybody. And when I do that, every leader's like, well, of course I would. So, but yet they'll maybe allow AI to write it and just copy and paste it and not look at it. I'm like, there's a disconnect there. It's the same role. It's a collaborative tool. It may help replace your assistant in certain things, but you still need to be involved. It's like the attorney I read that, had to find a bunch of briefs and found out none of those were accurate. Well, somebody should have proof checked it, just as if they'd had a paralegal do it. The response is they didn't. They thought it was easy, and it wasn't. It's easier when we use AI, but it's not necessarily easy. It doesn't remove us from the process, and it certainly doesn't remove our responsibility for accuracy and good discernment.
Excellent. Now, let's kind of move into this thought of legacy here. You've created
Hmm.
companies, you've created frameworks, you've built your community up, close to 500,000 now. Um, One day, all that's going to go away.
Hmm.
And when your grandchildren talk about you, what do you hope they're going to say?
I hope they see that first and foremost, I had an absolute love and adoration for my Lord and Savior. And I hope the second thing they think of is that I was a positive person. I had a positive outlook. I could look at any situation and find the silver lining. And the third thing is I hope that they inherit and see in me a generous spirit, one that realizes it's not about me, it has nothing to do with me. And if those things can happen, I'm sure there's others that it would be. I mean, obviously, I want them to hopefully find the love of Christ as well, and make that decision for salvation. And I probably should mention that. But as far as what they see in me, I hope it's that passion and that love for Christ, that continual yearning to deepen my relationship with Him, and again, a positive outlook and a generous spirit.
Good. Um, let's think about your spiritual sons and daughters, not your flesh and blood, but those that you've had the impact on spiritually in the marketplace. What message would you want to leave with them?
Really, the same thing. I want them to see that there was something unique about Jonathan, and it was his passion to draw closer to his Lord and Savior, that they see that positiveness, because I believe it does make a difference. Just I was mentioning in Philippians 4, 6, and 7, when I added those two words with thanksgiving, it changed everything in my mind. Maybe not for everybody, but it did for me. And then that generous spirit to realize that we're not here to accumulate for ourselves. We're not here to figure out how we can have the best life. We're actually here to figure out how we can serve others in Christ's name. And that doesn't mean we have to all be pastors, we have to all be missionaries or anything like that. That may be the case, but I think we're pastors and missionaries in the field that God placed us in. And that could be in the medical field. It could be as a teacher. It could be as a home builder, you name it. I think it just matters in that community that we're in that we demonstrate what it is to be Christ-like to the best of our ability and keep yearning to become more Christ-like in that process.
Excellent. You know, often legacy comes not from what we say, but from how we live and what we live out. Who modeled these things for you? Some of these things that you've kind of brought into your own life and are trying to embody. Who would you say modeled some of those things for you?
I would say the number one role was my father. He made plenty of mistakes as well, and I wouldn't pull that from him. He's gone, but I would tell that to him. But he also demonstrated some things that were core to him, and amidst his failures and errors, I know my father loved God and always strove to be a better man, so to speak, as my dad would have put it. And I also learned very much a generous spirit from my dad. My dad was not judgmental. Whether you came to him with a suit on or you came in rags, and if you needed something, he wanted to be there to add value, to help out, to do that. He didn't pass, immediate judgment on people. So I think he's probably had the biggest influence in my life in that area. Ironically, a lot of that influence happened in the last years of his life and the later years of my life.
That's good. And then, what's one prayer that you find yourself praying currently over your family, your clients, and just the people that, God is really kind of put under your influence right now through the platforms he's given you?
I think, there's a lot of things that I pray about, but one of those that I think I pray more than anything else is that whether it's my family or the communities that I'm involved in, that either through things I do or that others do, that Christ would put people in their lives that would cause those individuals to say, I want to draw closer to him. What is, I can look at my family and go, I can say it. And of course, it doesn't mean as much if somebody else says it. But, how can you put somebody in my teenagers' lives apart from me? Not that I can't be part of that, but in addition to me, that can help plant and water those seeds so that they have a desire to get to know you more. And I really pray that same for my community as well. I mean, I can't imagine a higher calling than to share God's gift of salvation with others. And while I don't talk about it as much as I talk about AI, if I was remiss in sharing that message when I had the opportunity, or even sometimes when I just felt the calling of the Spirit to share it because it was time to share it for somebody, even if I didn't know who that was, then I think then I'm missing the point and not serving him fully by not following those leadings.
Good. And for our listeners who right now feel torn between their entrepreneurial calling and ambitions and family responsibilities, what encouragement would you give to them?
Well, I would say if you're anything like me, and like most I know, we do this for our families, but it is also very easy to get caught in the joy and the excitement. I mean, I love running businesses. I love building. I love doing that. And there's no doubt sometimes that immediate emotional gratification is better than what we get when we go home and we have to listen to everybody that had a bad day and the dog that didn't get fed and everything else. And so work can seem sometimes to be very important, but I think we need to reflect back and go, why are we doing this? We're doing this to provide for our family, to give us that opportunity to go to, our kids' or grandkids' soccer game or concert or whatever it is. And again, everybody's got different goals and objectives to where they want to be. But I think it's important that we recenter and go back to those things that are why we're in business. And we need to remember that as members of Christ's family, our family is one of our top priorities. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't work and we should spend all our time with them. That's not teaching them and directing them and leading them. But it may very well mean we shouldn't spend 80 hours a week at work in the office and ignoring our family, because I don't think that's the right end of the pendulum either. And we need to be demonstrating to our family what it means to be Christ-like, what it means to be a Christ follower. And there's nothing wrong as part of that in demonstrating how that can happen in the business world. We can look back at many, many people in the Bible that were very successful in business or in the time what business was. And you look at Abraham, we can look at Solomon and many, many, many others. And, Job, if I thought for a moment, we could go on and on. But all those people were used to glorify God, and we can be done that same way. When it comes to our family, we need to remember they're not just watching out how much money we earn. They're paying attention to the time that we spend with them and the lessons that we teach them. And probably more than anything else, the example that we provide for them. And I've certainly learned that with my children and grandchildren. They pay attention to the things that we sometimes don't think they even catch. And so being a good role model to them is a huge part of our responsibility.
Perfect. Well, Jonathan, it's been a great conversation, and we got into a little AI. Normally, we talk a lot of AI, but this has been great. Where can people connect with you, not just for AI strategies, but just in general? Where are the best points for them to connect?
They just remember my name. It's Jonathan Mast, M-A-S-T. If they go to jonathanmast.com, all my connection information, ways to connect, learn, whatever, and I'd love to hear from people. That'd be great.
Fantastic. Jonathan, thanks for joining me today. It's been a great conversation, and thank you for sharing from the heart today.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to Called to Build. If this episode challenged or encouraged you, take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another faith-driven leader who's ready to rise. To go deeper, visit carlwillis.com for tools, training, and resources that will help you lead with purpose, steward with wisdom, and build what outlasts you. Remember, you weren't called to compete, you were called to build. Until next time, keep building what matters.